All right, if you are prepping for an exam on labor laws, you know the Factories Act of 1948 is a beast. But don't worry, in this explainer, we're going to cut right through the noise and focus on the exact details, the key section numbers, and the definitions that you absolutely have to nail to ace your test. So, here's our game plan. We'll start with the foundation, who and what this act even applies to. Then we're diving deep into the heart of it, the big rules on health and safety, especially for hazardous work. From there, it's all about work hours and rights, and we'll wrap up by looking at what happens when you break the rules. Let's get into it. Okay, first things first, let's build our foundation. Before we can even talk about the rules, we have to get crystal clear on who's covered and what's covered. These core definitions are the bedrock for everything else in the Act. This Act didn't just pop out of nowhere. It's got a long history, starting way back in 1881 with a law that was pretty much just about child labor. The 1948 Act that we're talking about today, that was a massive leap forward, pulling all sorts of laws together. But, and this is key, it's a living document. Just look at 1987. A huge amendment added a whole new chapter on hazardous processes, a direct response to terrible industrial disasters. Okay, this is a classic exam question, so listen up. What is a factory? The Act is super specific. It all comes down to two magic numbers: 10 or more workers if you're using power, and 20 or more if you're not. That's it. 10 with power, 20 without. Lock that in your brain. The Act also spells out two really important roles. First, the worker under Section 2L is defined incredibly broadly. It doesn't matter if you're hired directly or by a contractor, paid or not. If you're in the manufacturing process, you're a worker. Then you've got the occupier under Section 2N. Think of this as the person where the buck stops, the one with ultimate control. They're the one legally on the hook. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The Act carefully slices up the workforce by age. An adult is simple, 18 or older. A child is anyone under 15. But pay close attention to this middle category, the adolescent. They're between 15 and 18, kind of in a legal gray area. They can only be treated as an adult worker if, and only if, they get a special certificate of fitness. This is so important because it changes everything: their hours, their safety rules, you name it. So let's move on to the core pillars of the entire Act. We're talking about health, safety, and welfare. Think of these as the three non-negotiable legs of the stool that supports the entire idea of a safe and humane workplace. The health provisions in sections 11 to 20 are all about the physical environment. We're talking basics like cleanliness, good ventilation, safe drinking water. But there's one very specific number here that you absolutely have to remember. Section 16 on overcrowding. It mandates a minimum of 14.2 cubic meters of space for every single worker. Circle that number in your notes. Next up is safety. If health is about the environment, safety is about preventing accidents before they even have a chance to happen. This part gets technical, covering things like putting fences around machinery and inspecting lifts. And here's another key threshold you gotta know. Section 40B. If a factory has 1,000 or more workers, it is legally required to hire a dedicated safety officer. Okay, this table is pure gold for your exam. The Act is really smart about how it scales up welfare benefits. These aren't just nice suggestions. They're legally required once you hit certain numbers. A first aid box for every 150 workers, a canteen once you cross 250, a creche for more than 30 women workers, and a welfare officer at 500. You have to memorize these thresholds. They come up all the time. All right, we've covered the general stuff. Now we're moving into the high-stakes world of hazardous processes. That 1987 amendment added Chapter 4VA. And believe me, it was a total game changer. It put some incredibly strict duties on management to stop major accidents. The key thing to get from Sections 7A and 7B is that responsibility is a two-way street. It's not all on the factory owner. Sure, the occupier has to keep the workplace safe day to day, but Section 7B also puts the onus on the people who make the machines to ensure they're designed safely right from the get-go. It's a chain of responsibility. And this is where the Act gets really powerful. Section 41B says you have to disclose all the dangers, no more secrets. Section 41G makes a joint safety committee mandatory, giving workers a real voice at the table. But the most important one might be 41H. It gives every single worker the legal right, a shield really, to warn about imminent danger without the fear of getting fired for speaking up. That is huge. All right, let's talk about the clock.
Chapter VI of the Act is all about putting legal limits on working hours for adults. It's a balancing act, really, between productivity and preventing people from being overworked.
This table right here is your ultimate cheat sheet, and every one of these numbers is fair game for an exam. You've got a max of 48 hours a week and 9 hours a day. You have to get a half-hour break after 5 hours of work. And the spread over, which is just the total time from clocking in to clocking out, breaks included, can't be more than 10.5 hours. And here's the kicker from Section 59. Any overtime gets paid at double the normal rate.
Now, if those are the rules for adults, you can imagine the LEAK Act puts a whole other layer of protection on young people. And it does. For kids between 14 and 15, the daily work limit under Section 71 gets slashed in half to just 4.5 hours. Night work? Forget about it. Totally prohibited. And that weekly holiday? For a child, it's absolutely mandatory. No exceptions.
Okay, pop quiz time. This is exactly the kind of tricky question they love to ask. So, is this okay? The answer is a hard no, and here's why. Under Section 70, if an adolescent, remember that's 15 to 18, doesn't have that certificate of fitness, they are legally treated as a child for everything in this act. That means their work is capped at 4.5 hours a day. So 8 hours is a major violation. Everyone needs a break, right? Well, the act agrees. It doesn't just suggest time off, it guarantees the right to paid leave. Chapter 8 lays out the exact math for who gets it and how much they get. But you have to earn it. And the magic number here from Section 79 is 240 days. You have to have worked at least 240 days in a year to qualify. If you hit that mark, the math is simple. Adults get 1 day off for every 20 they work. For children, it's even better. 1 day off for every 15 days worked. This makes it crystal clear that paid leave is an earned right, not some optional perk.
All right, another quick test. A worker clocks in 235 days. Are they eligible? Yes or no? The answer is no. Close doesn't count in the eyes of the law. The threshold is 240 days, period. If you're even 1 day short, you are not legally entitled to paid leave for that year. It's that black and white.
So what happens when somebody breaks all these rules we've been talking about? Well, a law is only as good as its enforcement, and this is where the Factories Act shows its teeth. And we are not talking about a slap on the wrist here. For a general offense, you're looking at up to 2 years in jail. If that offense leads to a death, the fines get serious. If you get caught a second time, the penalties get even worse. But look at the violation for a hazardous process. Up to 7 years in prison. That tells you everything you need to know about what the Act considers most important. So when you pull it all together, what's the big picture? The Factories Act of 1948 isn't just a list of do's and don'ts. It's a whole system. It creates clear rights for workers and matching responsibilities for managers. It's really the legal foundation that says industrial growth cannot and should not come at the cost of human dignity. And that brings us to a final thought. This act was written for the world of 1948. So I'll leave you with this question. As automation, robotics, and AI completely change what a factory even is, how does this law need to evolve? What new dangers will it need to protect the workers of tomorrow from? Thank you for joining this explainer.